Hello and welcome to Politically Unstable. I'm Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor at the Washington Times. Today, I am joined by Michael Pearson, who's a pilot, aviation law professor and aviation law professor at Arizona State University and a trial lawyer, and Rick Castaldo, radar engineer. They wrote a column for the Washington Times identifying problems within our airline safety, the FAA, things that need to be modernized. And I will let you guys take it from here. The column caught my attention when it was submitted because it involved an incident with Air Force One. And you would think the safest airline in the world would be Air Force One. But as the president was traveling over to England to meet with Keir Starmer, a commercial airline entered Air Force One's airspace. And there could have been a collision. So, Michael, I will start off with you. Can you kind of take us through this line of events and give us your state of where you think the commercial airline industry is and what the FAA, now under the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, needs to do to kind of improve upon air traffic control and to modernize the way that we travel?
Well, thank you. I'll go ahead and start. Well, the issue between Air Force One and the commercial airliner, although it got a lot of publicity, and certainly it could have been catastrophic. There was plenty of separation there. There was some technical rules that were violated, but at no time was President Trump in any real danger of colliding with the commercial airliner. It's just basically there's excessive separation applied between certain aircraft, including Air Force One, Air Force Two, and some other military aircraft and commercial airliners. And that was just compromised at that time. So while it was an issue and while the airplane should not have been there, I want to assure everyone, including President Trump, understands that at no time was there any real danger to the president. With that said, the system is archaic. Rick will speak to this, I'm sure, in a moment. But perhaps more importantly, and for what Secretary Duffy should be focusing on, is not doing the same thing that's been done historically in the past, certainly for the past 40 and 50 years that I've been involved in aviation, and expecting a different outcome. The FAA is a dysfunctional agency. Changing the administrator is not going to help. People have way too much authority in certain silos, including the Air Traffic Organization. And there's a revolving door that certainly is prevalent and entrenched in the aviation community, where bureaucrats that work for the FAA retire, go to work for contractors, and then go peddle their wares, including airspace and technology improvements, to people in the very same section, branch, and contracting offices that they just left. Now, this is normal in government enterprise and services. The thing that's different is that the FAA's mandate for running a modern, efficient, safe system is greatly compromised by this. And I'll give you an example. As the article stated, this is not the first time that the FAA has allegedly tried, or Congress or the DOT, to modernize the system and make it more safe and efficient. In fact, as you probably read in the article, in the early 2000s, something called NextGen was created and implemented in mid-2000s, 2004, 2005. And to date, the expected cost of those programs are over $35 billion. Only 16%, at least my number crunching, of the improvements have actually been entrenched or integrated into the system. So the FAA is in the process of trying to follow Secretary Duffy's mandate and the president's mandate to modernize the system, both for the safety aspects and certainly to make it more efficient. But there's many structural problems the FAA has that they're not simply going to overcome by rhetoric, and they're certainly not going to overcome the issues by allowing the exact same people who created the problems to now advise them and guide them on how to fix the problems that the bureaucrats created. And that's what I see happening with the DOT and the FAA at this time. They're relying on the very same individuals inside the FAA, specifically the Air Traffic Organization, the ATO branch, to guide them on how to achieve these modern efficiencies and be stewards of the taxpayers' money. And they've got a proven track record of not being able to do that. So at the end of the day, as the old saying goes, if you rely on the same bureaucracy that created the inefficiencies, it's the very, to fix the problem, it's the very definition, as I put in the article, of air traffic insanity. Failure is assured. The best thing that I could see the Trump administration doing, and certainly Secretary Duffy and his assistant Steve Bradbury doing, is basically putting together a panel of experts who know the inherent problems inside the FAA. Some of it is corruption, some of it is ineptitude, and some of it is simply a bureaucratic laziness, where they're going to channel the same or large amounts of funding to people in the outside industry who will not be able to get the job done. It's been proven before. So what needs to happen is it needs to proceed a different way. And there are a lot of bright people out there that have worked inside the FAA that have knowledge of actually where the flaws are and how to avoid these. They're not even speed bumps. They're things that will derail the entire program. The taxpayer will be on the hook for tens of billions of dollars, and in 10 or 15 years, we'll be talking about the same problems unless it is handled as far as the design and the creation of a new way to address the flaws in the system. And that's a broad overview. But right now, the way we are set up is that we're doing the same old thing the way it's been done for decades. And I can guarantee you there will be failure. The system will not work. And we're not going to proceed in an orderly, efficient fashion.
Rick, we're going into a busier travel season with the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving and Christmas. We know that during Joe Biden's administration, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, during this time of year, there were several airline cancellations, miscommunications, delays that grounded people for several weeks. Under Secretary Duffy, earlier this year, there was ground stops at Newark Airport. Reports were they're modernizing the airport. They were running off of just one runway. They were trying to build out the other runway, but there was inefficiencies within that airport that made Secretary Duffy kind of go in and investigate. And he said, essentially, that the FAA was operating off of floppy disks. And the air traffic controllers, there was a shortage of them. A lot of people were overworked. Elon Musk even ventured over there to try to see what they needed for modernization. What, through your experience, does the FAA, the DOT need to do to modernize, and not in the same way of over next gen? I mean, that was just that was in the 2000s. So it looks, Pete Buttigieg said he was upgrading the system. Secretary Duffy comes in, says there is no modernization. We're basically throwing things together with duct tape and floppy disks. What is your experience, and what changes are needed under this new administration that haven't been able to be accomplished over previous?
So I'll go straight to the Newark discussion. The Newark discussion, and Michael can weigh in on this, goes back that for nearly 30 years, the FAA hasn't been able to staff various places in New York City, specifically the TRACON, Terminal Radar Approach Control. And even back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a shortage of staff in New York TRACON. It's very complex airspace. It has noise abatement. And the solution put forth by the same people that are there today, given Secretary Duffy advice, was to put more technology that had already failed in Los Angeles. There's tons of reports that discuss this. This is the vendor lock from one or two companies that have been building the same equipment and have no incentive to change. And frankly, with the rotating staff, they've done a great job hiring former FAA people to do their bidding. And I won't go into names. I'm not sure that's appropriate, but I can tell you that the company that runs all of the telecom, terrestrial telephony, the bandwidth that Secretary Duffy talks about, they put in a system that they knew had already failed in Los Angeles. And the same people that did that are now acting as the COO and some of the executives in the FAA giving Secretary Duffy advice. And don't leave out the new administrator. He came from an airline. He understands the structural defects of aged equipment. The radar infrastructure is falling apart. They've been spending a fortune inside, and they've made like near zero progress. I can give you a number of examples. Not sure you have enough time. The fact is, when you failed at hiring and staffing New York TRACON, and you changed it to the Newark traffic to Philadelphia, you created a firestorm of dysfunction with controllers that didn't want to move but wanted to save their job. People that were unfamiliar with the Newark airspace that still gets all its data from the area around Newark, the radars, the nav aids, the health of the system. It was convenient for the entrenched bureaucrats to blame it on the runway closure. That was staged and planned, and that's a very common occurrence. Resurfacing runways and fixing them for heavier aircraft overrun areas. That was all cannon fodder put forth. And frankly, Secretary Duffy means well, but he inherited a bureaucracy that was left in place by Pete Buttigieg, who's an abject failure at everything he touched. That's my position.
And I'll echo what Rick said, very salient remarks. Now, keep in mind, anytime that in the past this has been micromanaged by people within inside the FAA, disaster has resulted. The reason we're down 3,000 controllers today is because of Obama-era policy in 2011 to eliminate the pipeline of air traffic controller training that was being handled and paid for by universities, 36 schools across the country. And it was due to alleged diversity issues, which were non-existent. You had radical elements inside an organization, an employee organization called the NBCFA, National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees, who had power at the upper levels of the government, including one of their past presidents was the head of civil rights, and they made a push to hire people based on race, not competency. And there was plenty of diversity in the FAA. The fact of the matter is, the first barrier analysis said that the organization exceeded the number of black males, Hispanic males, so on and so forth. And actually, white females were most underrepresented as controllers. But the FAA politically pushed to eliminate the CTI hiring pipeline. Now, they wiped out a hiring list of over 3,000 students who had been trained and told they would get preferential hiring consideration, not jobs, but preferential hiring consideration. Then they ran them through a biometric test, which was specifically engineered to identify people on race. If you had aviation experience, you got 0 points. If you were from a CTI school, you got low points. Basically, if your worst grade in high school was science, you got 15 points. It was engineered and proven by our experts, at least, to discriminate against non-African American applicants. So this problem about fatigue has been self-induced. It's another example of the FAA shooting themselves in the proverbial foot or cutting their nose off to spite their face. And here we are, 14 years later with an Obama-era policy that no one's addressed. It takes 3 to 5 years to train a controller, depending on the area. New York, it can be longer, like Rick said. So you have the very same agency that are engaging in these policies, quite frankly, sacrificing public safety for DEI concerns, that are now put in charge of billions of taxpayer dollars and advising Secretary Duffy on the proper course to take. It's like having a blind person navigate you through a hailstorm or firestorm of problems that are going to occur. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, Rick's mind, and other people that have been involved in this industry for decades, including Bob Poole of the Resonance Foundation, will be a good person for Secretary Duffy to consult, that the problems are endemic. There's technologies out there that can fix this, or that can at least do a very quick patch on the system while the underlying ineptitudes and deficiencies are being fixed. There's defined interval designed by an air traffic controller that actually is a fantastic way to eliminate a lot of the delays and maximize the use of airspace. The FAA, because of stubbornness and personalities, doesn't want to look at it. There are people out there that can guide Secretary Duffy successfully through this issue. If, in fact, he continues, as Rick mentioned, as I stated, to rely on the very same people that created the problem, it's not going to work.
There's a couple of points that need to be made clear from a historical perspective. In 1996, the FAA was relieved because of Secretary Mineta and a task force of working within the federal procurement rules. They're called the FARs, Federal Acquisition Regulations. They received permission and law to remove the FAA from that April 1st, 1996. I was in the FAA at that time, and they tried to push decisions down to make it more amenable to building faster, quicker, cheaper with a lot of commercial equipment. They changed the name of it, but they didn't change the people. As Michael mentioned, you still had folks wedded to the way they've always done business, and the people that are there now have grown up in that entrenched bureaucracy, and they don't know any other way to do the job other than what they've been doing for 30 years. And because of that, they don't infuse with new equipment. They don't take any modern technology. The FAA hasn't done that for a while. They threaten to do it. They try to do it, but they're not successful. The last major change that was deployed nationwide for tracking airplanes was automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, which, to one of Michael's points, will allow pilots to more accurately fly the plane, follow people, reduce noise, reduce fuel burn. The FAA refuses to implement the common sense pieces that they should do that will help everybody increase airport capacity, increase safety, reduce fuel burn. And although I'm not what you would consider a greenie, it'll reduce your carbon footprint. Everybody ought to love it, except the FAA doesn't do anything about it. They have meetings upon meetings, and they stir the pot and they talk about what they're going to do.
Well, this is the definition of the swamp and the definition of bureaucracy and why you never see any modernization. And it's the revolving door. Once you're there, you understand the equipment, you understand who's there, go on the outside, sell other equipment, saying this will be a patch for your problems, but not really care because you're incentivized by the dollars. Michael, I want to kind of take a step out because I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that is confused as to what the federal government does and maintains in the aviation industry versus the role of the commercial airliners versus the role of different airports across the country, because we've all been at airports that are efficient, that get people through the gates, on the planes where there's little to no delays. And then there are airports like Newark, like Charlotte, major hubs that their problems seem to compound. If things don't go well at the beginning of the day, by the end of the day, flights are canceled, there are delays, and whatnot. So what are the roles of these three things? What oversight can the government provide, or what modernization can the federal government provide that can help the other two areas?
Well, under the FAA's Enabling Act, which created the Federal Aviation Agency in 1958, which subsequently became the Federal Aviation Administration about 10 years later, when the DOT was formed, the FAA has plenary authority. That means total authority over anything regarding aviation, including aviation safety. The commercial airlines are they're a commercial entity. Airports, almost all airports, not all, but almost all airports are owned by the local municipalities. The FAA has approximately 45 to 48,000 employees at any one time. Approximately 18,000 of those are in the air traffic branch. Most of the people in the FAA their job functions are to support the national airspace system, which is the safe and orderly movement of air traffic day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. So you have a lot of people, airways facilities, that are entrusted with maintaining the technology we have, regardless of how archaic it is. You have, of course, a large personnel branch that has to handle HR functions. The air traffic organization is by far the largest organization, simply because of the numbers of controllers required. And the other organizations provide support. Each one of these institutions I call them silos. They do a very poor job of communicating between each other. And in fact, there's a lot of turf wars going on, and Rick can certainly speak to that. He knows what I'm speaking of. It's very inefficient. And the way the organization is run is inefficient. And more or less, the goal of most FAA bureaucrats are to lay low, not cause problems, so they get promoted and they live a long and happy career ensconced in the swamp, as you say, back in DC. So the FAA has total authority to do whatever is necessary, including restricting flow rates in airports, metering airplanes for safety purposes. And I want to assure people that the FAA, I believe under Secretary Duffy, certainly will do that. He's already said if it gets down to the point where we have to meter or flow traffic to increase safety, we will do that. So they've taken proactive steps. The problem is in that silo I spoke of, the air traffic organization, where all the things Rick spoke of go to die. They just literally go to die. There's a lot of bright, intelligent people out there, literally, that could form a task force and give on-point, salient recommendations to Secretary Duffy on how to do this enormous task he's been assigned. I don't envy Secretary Duffy at all. This is like trying to change a tire on a moving car going down the freeway because the organization is entrusted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with providing safe air travel. So how do you do that? There's a lot of people that know how to do it. There's a lot of risk-averse people inside the FAA that won't do it. And so I think at the end of the day, the bottom line recommendation, I personally, and I've talked to Rick obviously many times, that I think both of us, Rick certainly jump in if necessary, that we would both request or try to get the message to Secretary Duffy would be you cannot listen to people inside the air traffic organization on how to successfully modernize and handle and mitigate the enormous problem he was left with the Buttigieg administration. It won't work. Those are the same bureaucrats that will hunker down until this administration is finished, and then they'll just go back to doing the same old thing. They're actually delay policies. They frustrate policies. As Rick said before, the same people are in the same places, and these new technologies and new ideas that would actually help Secretary Duffy complete his mission that he's been tasked with by the president are going to be completely frustrated, and they're already being frustrated by people within the ATO. I already have dozens of examples.
The announcements that Secretary Duffy made a few months ago about the brand new air traffic control system, delay. They haven't even issued a solid requirements document. They have these new things they're putting out that sound like we're gonna all sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya. There's no substance. They missed the key function of systems engineering. They have not defined the requirements about what to fix, what the priority is. There are people within the FAA, this is my opinion, who are not sure what their own mission is. It's bifurcated. There's the safety side of it, and then there's the air traffic side that includes air traffic controls technicians, engineers, the people that build and certify and maintain the equipment at all the airports. Two completely different sides, one focused on safety and the other one with keeping the national airspace system running. You have to modernize something that has to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. when you couple that with a hub and spoke system and the weather events and aging equipment outages, you end up with Newark meltdowns. And it frustrates everybody, including the air traffic controllers. They, when the screen goes blank.
It's 5 o'clock.
When the screen goes blank and you've got 60 airplanes in the air in your area and you can't talk to anybody, I would use a vulgarity, but I won't. It's a mess.
Michael, I mean, all of this is making me feel a little apprehensive to fly. To be honest with you, can you assure our viewers that when they get on a plane to take off, that they will be safe? Yes, the systems are antiquated, and yes, that it's going to take years to repair or modernize, it sounds like. But I mean, are there human controls? And because I mean, there are very few accidents. We see a story, every few months, but nothing major in terms of airline crashes. So can we be assured that the system is safe?
Well, there's a couple things here. One is statistical manipulation that the FAA has done. Specifically, since something called the ATSAT program, which is a controller immunity program, was put in place approximately 15 years ago by a prior administration. So you don't always see nor hear the number of close calls out there. Now, with that said, to address the apprehension, the FAA, certainly, it's my belief, and certainly in Secretary Duffy's administration, will put in mechanisms, basically metering and flow control, limiting the number of flights to certain areas based upon staffing, much the same they do now when the weather's bad. So the mechanisms are in place, and I don't believe the FAA will sacrifice safety. I don't believe that will occur. You are having more and more controllers that are sticking out or not showing up and engaging in alternate employment. I will also tell you, I've been in a government shutdown. It was approximately 21 days, it was the end of December of 95 through January, when I was working as an air traffic controller. And the controllers will get paid back. So when people are saying controllers are going to go without pay, that's simply not true. It's delayed pay, back pay, but they get paid. However, the staffing issues lead to fatigue, and certainly you'll have to shut down sectors, and it will be an inconvenience for the flying public. You won't have 15 or 20 flights to a destination. It might be cut to 10. You'll have delays that you wouldn't have before. Certainly approaching the travel season, if it continued, the delays. The worst day from a travel standpoint for the air traffic system is the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving. That's actually the busiest day of the year inside the agency. It's called Black Wednesday because of the number of people trying to get from point A to point B for Thanksgiving. If that occurred, certainly you'll have to slow down the traffic. So it will be an inconvenience, but I would not be afraid to fly. And I fly all the time, and I will take commercial flights all the time. I'm just saying that the system's been stressed to a point that you need innovative new ideas, and you need bureaucrats that are willing and able to take steps to implement those ideas. And I can tell you from probably what you've heard Rick say, and I say the people aren't there. So Secretary Duffy, no matter how strongly he feels, is being misled and misguided, either intentionally or unintentionally. And I can tell you some of the things that were said by the head of ATO at the time, or a surrogate before the head of ATO left, there's a new one, were simply untrue. At the press conference when Secretary Duffy was speaking about the improvements coming up. In fact, most people inside the agency I know, and people that were knowledgeable outside the agency, their jaw dropped, because it's the same old rhetoric. Secretary Duffy is being told and given a storyline that people have been given for decades and decades before him. And as I said, if you want to broadly look at the problem, you're relying on the very same individuals and organization that created the problem, wasted billions of dollars of taxpayer funds over the decades, and have achieved very little inefficiencies and safety improvements in the system. The way the system is structured now is to protect the system itself. And that's absolutely the truth. And there's a lot of different things, a lot of different offshoots. I talked about the controller immunity program. It's a whole different subject matter. But the system needs help. And at the end of the day, relying on the same folks to fix the system that have been trying to fix the system for decades simply isn't going to work.
Rick, my question to you is, administrations usually have just 4 years, right? We know that the Trump administration is term limited. It's lame duck. They will be out in 2028, and then whomever comes in will take control. We know that it's an embedded bureaucracy with the same people that are resisting change, and that happens each administration. And the reason these bureaucrats last so long is because they know that they've got job consistency, whereas their bosses will be in and out every 4 years, every 8 years. With the technologies that we have right now, can a modernization be done if you had the right people in charge within 4 years? Or is it a 10-year plan? Is it a 20-year plan?
It cannot be done in 4 years. We do not even have the manufacturing base in this country for the equipment you need. I'll give you a great example. Secretary Duffy said we're going to put in 600 and some new radars. We don't have any U.S. manufacturers that can build radars today in that volume because the FAA hasn't been buying them and DOD hasn't been buying them. They were overbuilt to specifications by very smart engineers in what was called the Brown Book in the 80s. The system that's out there is robust, but it's falling apart. It's like an antique car that's 30 years old that's been well maintained. And then you get it when somebody else takes over and they run it into the ground. They don't change the oil, they don't change the tires, and pretty soon it's broke on the side of the road. That's what you have at the FAA today. 4 years is not enough to do anything in that. It needs to be a comprehensive, engineering driven with requirements and a disciplined system. And it's going to cause delays as you build new equipment and put it at airports. Just taking a radar at an airport and putting it on top of a tower it's immense amount of work, and it disturbs everything in the tower. The surface radars that are at a lot of the airports, they're above the control tower. You've got to go in and work at midnight, and you've got to have people that build them and deploy them. And the FAA, they just kick the can down the road. It's too hard to do. And it's easier just to get your paycheck and stick your head in a closet and wait until the next administration shows up with new people.
A perfect example of the way Secretary Duffy has been misled was the timeline. I totally agree with Rick. As soon as people outside or inside the industry that know, and certainly people knowledgeable that are no longer with the FAA, heard this pronouncement of we'll be able to fix this in 2 to 4 years, that was intentional, and it was misleading Secretary Duffy, almost setting him up for failure. When that was told and told to Secretary Duffy, and when they announced that, and there was a press conference, and I was watching it, I personally believe that from talking to several people inside the ATO, that you had people that were literally trying to set the administration up for failure. In the 2-year period, about the time of the next election, I know it sounds conspiratorial, but it's not. There is absolutely no way to fix this system in a short period of time. And by Secretary Duffy relying on the FAA person who told him that, it shows that there's an agenda, and that, quite frankly, Secretary Duffy is relying on the wrong people, or he never would have said that, because it's practically, physically impossible to do it from a physical standpoint. From a technology standpoint, it's impossible to do. Again, they're overlooking existing technologies that could help because they're not going to cost a lot of money. I mean, at the end of the day, the manufacturers, the vendors, the outside engineering firms and manufacturing firms don't make billions of dollars if we go a different direction. It just needs to be done a different way. And Secretary Duffy needs some trusted agents inside the FAA, or people that have knowledge of the way the FAA works, to give him salient, clear advice. The people that are speaking to him now, and I know some, and so does Rick, we know him personally, are misleading Secretary Duffy. There might be nice people, but they themselves are either ignorant, they don't know the real problems, or they're trying to feed Secretary Duffy a line he wants to hear. And frankly, it needs to go a different direction, or failure is certain.
let me give you even a better example, Kelly. We talked about next gen being the last thing the FAA tried to do. Two of the folks that have been there 15 years in next gen are the ones giving the deputy administrator advice on how to modernize. And in any large bureaucracy, when you have someone who's risen up to be the deputy administrator and they get an outside administrator from industry, they tell them what they know. And the same folks that have been there are telling them what to fix and change. And they're responsible for the failure.
So
and there's quite a few of them.
In the best case scenario, let's take, administrations out of this. Assume you've got an outsider who has a team around him that is experienced and knows what they're doing and wants to implement change against the bureaucracy that has been resisting it for so long. Given the technology that we have, how long would it take to modernize the system? And let's just pretend you've got all the time in the world. Administrations don't change. In the perfect best case scenario, what is the timeline needed, and how much would you estimate it's going to cost the American taxpayer?
Well, first of all, you're never done modernizing. You can't possibly build enough equipment to put it all in one day. So as you roll out a production schedule of, let's say, 200 radars, these are $10, $12 million a piece. They go to airports. They've got to be shipped on trucks. They've got to be installed. They've got to be manufactured. There's not enough people on the planet today to go to all the airports and do everything in one foul swoop. It would take the equivalent of how we marshaled forces in World War II to build airplanes and spin up the war effort to go provide equipment to the military. It really takes an effort that large. Historically, it's been done. There was an administrator named J. Lynn Helms back in 1980 who built something called the Brown Book and completely modernized and got a huge budget. But he was an engineer and he hired smart people, and they weren't encumbered with all the bureaucracies and the lack of a meritocracy, which is there today. You've got people there that aren't qualified to be in their jobs, my opinion. And
well, I agree absolutely with what Rick's saying. And with all due respect to the current FAA administrator, the FAA administrator has no idea of the inefficiencies and the problems in the air traffic branch. He's a pilot, not an air traffic controller, not an engineer. Rick and I combined are both. And no matter how hard the administrator tries, he's more or less a political appointment that won't be able to identify the inefficiencies and fix the system. And I totally agree with Rick. It's not going to be overnight. Even at breakneck speed, if all the resources were focused on it, best case scenario, 6 to 8 years, worst case scenario, 15 years, and it will require continual improvement, and it will require that the administration, whoever it may be, now and in the future, focus on this. Anything else is a pipe dream. Anything else is setting the current administration up for failure to say it can be done sooner.
I actually take
go ahead,
a more
go ahead.
radical view. I think it needs to be corporatized immediately.
I was just going to ask you that.
Herman Schuster tried to do that. Now he's out of Congress. I went and listened to the hearing as an interested citizen. The people that were there were fought tooth and nail by the Democrats, specifically a congressman named DeFazio, who accused them of giving all the money to contractors. Absolute BS. You have to corporatize and remove it from the congressional budget problem with you don't have money. This is what the shutdown's about. We should be paying controllers today, technicians. We should be throwing an immense amount of resources right now into the aviation infrastructure. Instead, they're doodling in the margins.
I agree with
Michael,
Rick.
hold on. Yeah, Michael, because I just want to make this point, because when you say privatize anything, the left does go crazy. But if you look at what we're doing in space, it's Elon Musk's SpaceX. It's all these billionaires that are doing all of the advancements when it comes to space technology. It is not NASA. NASA has been outdated and is now relying on all of these private entities. When it comes to air traffic control, when it comes to the FAA, you agree with Rick that the best solution to this problem would be for private industry to take it on.
Yeah, but it takes a time to set that up also. And here's the other problem with that. The current group that was initially proposed by Schuster, I agree with Rick. I was there at the same time, or at least listening at the same time. The problem of it is the proposals going forward are laced with prior union NACA officials, laced with prior bureaucrats. And what they want to do is take the very same system, corporatize it, and quite frankly, on the union side, for more money, more benefits. And I'm telling you, they have been and are working, including some of the past union presidents right now, to push for privatization. So pure privatization, where you take vested interests out, i.e. former union leaders and former ATO 1 directors and people inside the agency, it's just going to move the problem to a different organization. It has to be pure, it has to be clean, and it has to be people that are focused on the public welfare and the best thing for the public and not vested interests. And that's the problem. Yes, I think privatization or any form, even a separate government agency, where you isolate the problem of the revolving door and people with vested interests, both from the labor side and from the procurement, manufacturing side. You have to keep those people out of it, because you're not going to get a pure results-oriented solution, i.e. safe, more efficient system, if you allow people with vested interests to control it.
Well, Michael and Rick, this has been illuminating. This has been a longer conversation than I anticipated, but it exemplifies what I hear happening in so many other agencies. The Pentagon has similar stories. If you get the Obamacare disaster with the health insurers and whatnot, similar stories. It's almost like you gotta light a match and burn it all down in order to rebuild it efficiently. But I think that our listeners and our readers will definitely find this interesting, and we wish Secretary Duffy the best of luck. But I've seen his, press announcements. We're all rooting for him to be successful. But I also, when he said 2 to 4 years, this all can be done, I was like, wow, that's ambitious. And by the sounds, it is overly ambitious.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how Secretary Duffy's been misled by the vested interest we talked about. He needs to go outside that echo chamber and get folks that really have a realistic perception with enough knowledge, both on the technology side and the air traffic side, to actually complete the objective and complete the mission. As it is now, it's not going to happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks.